The night was cold, and silence covered the small wooden cabin. The human, John, sat alone near a dim lamp, reading an old book. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, making a soft but uneasy sound. He thought it was just another quiet evening, far away from the noise of the colonies and far away from war. Then came the knock. It was not loud, but sharp 3 small hits on the door. John froze. Few people came this deep into the forest. He had no neighbors nearby, no friends visiting, and no reason for anyone to knock at his door at this hour. He stood up slowly. His boots pressed against the wooden floor, each step echoing in the silence. His hand reached for the latch, but he stopped. Another knock came, weaker than before. John pulled the door open. There she was, a small, alien girl. No older than 12 by human count, stood on the doorstep. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and shining, filled with tears. Her thin arms wrapped around herself as she trembled in the cold. Her dress was torn, her feet bare, and her lips shook as if every word cost her strength. For a moment, John thought his eyes were tricking him. What was a child doing here, alone in the forest? Then she spoke, her voice low, broken yet heavy with pain. My mom died today. Can I spend the day with you, human? The words cut through the night like a blade. John's chest tightened. She did not cry out loud. She did not beg. But her voice carried the weight of loss. No child should ever carry. He hesitated. Every part of his training told him not to get involved. Aliens had their own problems, their own rules, and their own ways of treating the weak. But when he looked at her eyes, wet, desperate, yet brave, he could not close the door. He stepped aside and spoke gently. Okay, but stay close. The girl nodded quickly, as if afraid he might change his mind. She stepped inside, moving like a shadow, careful, quiet, almost invisible. Her small frame shook with every breath, and John noticed she had been walking for a long time. Dust covered her feet, and small cuts marked her legs. John shut the door, locking it behind them. The cabin felt warmer now, but the air carried a new tension. The girl stood near the door, not moving further. She looked at the lamp, the table, the chair, as if she had never seen such things before, or perhaps had forgotten what a safe home looked like. What's your name? John asked. She looked down, whispering. Lyra. He repeated it softly, testing the sound. Lyra. Sit down, Lyra. You're safe here. She obeyed, but carefully, as though unsure if safety truly existed. She sat on the edge of the chair, her back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her big eyes never left him. John noticed the way she watched him. It was not trust, not yet, but something close to hope. She was measuring him, wondering if his kindness was real or just another trick. He poured her a cup of warm water. When he placed it before her, she hesitated. Then she lifted the cup with shaking hands and drank, as if she had not tasted water in days. John felt anger rising not at her, but at whoever had left her in this state. He knew enough about her people to understand. Orphans were seen as burdens, mouths without purpose, and often abandoned. But to leave a child like this, wandering alone in the forest after her mother's death, was cruel beyond reason. You came alone? He asked. She nodded. No one wanted me. The words struck him harder than the knock on his door. Her small voice carried no tears, no scream, only truth. And that truth felt heavier than anything John had carried in his life. He wanted to ask more, but he held back. He knew pushing her now would only close the fragile door of trust she had opened by coming here. Instead, he placed bread on the table. Eat, he said simply. She reached for it slowly, as though unsure if she was allowed. When she finally tasted it, her eyes widened slightly. She chewed carefully, savoring every bite. It was a simple piece of bread, but for her, It seemed like a feast. For a while, silence filled the cabin. Only the sound of her eating and the crackle of the lamp kept the night alive. John watched her, his thoughts running deep. Why had she chosen him? Why had she knocked on his door instead of hiding somewhere until she starved? Then he remembered her words, "Can I spend the day with you, human? Not forever. Not weeks. Just a single day." She had come not for survival, but for something more, something simple yet powerful. She wanted presence, comfort, someone who would not walk away. John leaned back in his chair, looking at her again. Her small figure, her tired eyes, her fragile hands gripping the bread tightly. A child who had lost everything except the courage to knock. That courage told him something. She was not ordinary, and as the wind outside grew stronger, John realized this night was only the beginning. The cabin was quiet again, but the silence was not the same as before. It was no longer the silence of loneliness. Now it was the silence of two strangers, one human and one alien child, both unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Lyra sat at the table with crumbs of bread on her lap. Her hands were folded tightly, as if she feared the food might vanish if she let go. She looked around the room with wide eyes, almost like she was memorizing every detail. John watched her carefully. She was too calm for a child who had just lost her mother. Her voice had been steady, but her eyes told another story. They held a storm, hidden and waiting. After a long moment, she whispered, "Can I stay close, just for today?" John frowned. "Close? What do you mean?" She raised her head, her eyes glowing faintly in the lamplight. "I don't want to be alone. If I sit by the wall, the shadows feel like they are moving. If I walk outside, the wind sounds like voices. When I close my eyes, I hear my mother calling me. But when I open them, she is gone." Her words broke the steady rhythm of John's heart. He had fought wars, faced beasts, even survived betrayal. Yet nothing in his past had prepared him for the raw truth of a child's grief spoken so simply. He nodded slowly. "You can stay. Close." She shifted her chair nearer to him without asking, pulling her legs up and hugging her knees. Her body leaned slightly toward his arm, though she didn't dare touch him. The small movement said more than any words could. She wanted to feel safe. John turned the lamp lower. "Get some rest, Lyra. You need sleep." But she shook her head quickly, almost in panic. "If I sleep, they'll find me." John's brow tightened. "They? Who's after you?" She pressed her lips together, refusing to speak. Her hands clutched at something under her torn dress. He noticed it now, a thin chain, half hidden, with a small metal pendant. She kept her fingers on it as if it was her lifeline. John didn't push further. He had learned long ago that some answers came only when trust was strong enough. Instead, he spoke softly, "No one will hurt you here. I give you my word." The girl blinked at him, as if weighing his words against all the lies she had heard in her short life. Finally, she whispered, "Humans keep promises." John leaned back, his voice steady. "I do." The fire in the lamp crackled faintly, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. Lyra's eyes followed the shifting shapes, and she moved closer until her shoulder almost brushed his arm. The trust was still fragile, like glass, but it was there to ease her fear. John began telling her small stories of the forest outside. River that carried silver fish, the tall oak tree that lightning had struck but could not break, the way stars looked when the sky cleared after the storm. His voice was calm, slow, carrying pictures that distracted her from the darkness pressing outside. For the first time, she smiled faintly, though it was quick and uncertain. "Stars look different on my world," she whispered. John nodded. "And yet, here you are, under ours." Her smile faded, and her eyes grew heavy. She leaned against the chair, her head tilting slightly. But even as she began to drift, her fingers still held the pendant tightly. John watched her closely. Every instinct told him that the pendant was the key. It was no ordinary trinket. He had seen alien technology before, and this piece carried the same quiet hum, almost too faint to notice. Whatever it was, it mattered. He leaned back, thinking. If others were searching for her, it was not just because she was an orphan. It was because of what she carried on, maybe even who she was. Outside, a branch snapped. John's eyes darted to the window. The forest was dark, the wind cold, but the sound was not of wind or storm. It was the sound of feet many feet. He reached for the small knife kept by his side. Quietly, he blew out the lamp until the room was swallowed by darkness. Lyra stirred, half awake. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dark. She looked at him with fear and then at the window. The sound came again, closer this time. Lyra gripped his sleeve for the first time. Her fragile voice trembled as she whispered, "They found me." John tightened his grip on the knife, his jaw hardening. The fragile request she had made to stay close had now become a promise he could not break. And in that moment, he understood. This was no simple orphan story. This was the beginning of something larger, something dangerous. The night was no longer safe. The cabin was dark, except for the faint glow of the small lamp John lit again after the noise outside faded. Whoever had been in the forest seemed to move away, at least for now. But John knew they would return. He looked at Lyra. She sat quietly at the table, her hands still holding the small pendant under her dress. Her wide eyes followed him as he moved, as if she feared he might leave her alone. John decided she needed more than silence, she needed strength. He pulled out a small loaf of bread and a pot of stew he had kept from the morning. The smell filled the cabin, warm and comforting. Lyra's eyes widened. She sat straighter, her hands loosening just a little. "Hungry?" John asked softly. She nodded quickly, but did not reach forward. It was as if she was waiting for permission. John placed a bowl in front of her, filling it with stew. Steam rose into the air, carrying the scent of herbs and meat. For a moment, she only stared at it. Then, carefully, she picked up the spoon and took a bite. Her lips trembled as the warmth touched her tongue. She chewed slowly, almost as if she could not believe the food was real. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from the shock of kindness. "You can eat as much as you want," John said. She looked at him quickly, as if checking if he truly meant it. Then she ate slowly at first, then faster, until the bowl was empty. John filled it again without a word. She ate until her hands stopped shaking and her face carried a small, soft glow. When she finally placed the spoon down, she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was so quiet that John almost missed it. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Everyone deserves food." But Lyra shook her head. "Not in my world." John leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about your world," Lyra hesitated. Her fingers went back to the pendant, holding it tightly. She lowered her eyes, her voice shaking as she spoke. "On my world, only the strong eat first. The weak, they wait. Sometimes they never get food at all." John felt anger rise inside him. He had heard of cruel systems, but hearing it from a child's mouth was different. He looked at her carefully. "And your mother?" Lyra's lips pressed together. For a moment, she said nothing, then finally whispered, "She gave me her share. Always, even when she was sick, she told me. If she was gone, I must keep this." Her hand lifted the pendant slightly into the light. It shimmered faintly, almost alive. John frowned. "What is it?" Lyra shook her head quickly, hiding it again under her dress. Fear flashed across her face. If they see it, they'll take it. They'll kill me. They'll kill you too. Her voice was sharp with terror. John realized then that the necklace was not just memory. It was a secret. Something powerful enough to make her tribore whoever hunted her, willing to destroy anyone who held it. He leaned closer, his voice steady. I won't let them. As long as you're here, no one touches you. That's my word. She looked at him, her eyes filling again with tears. Not just grief this time, but something new, trust. Fragile, but real. John stood and added another log to the fire, warming the cabin further. He thought she would fall asleep now that her stomach was full. But Lyra surprised him. Can I ask something? She whispered. Go ahead. She looked straight at him, her voice trembling but strong. Why are you helping me? Humans don't care about my kind. My people say humans only take. They never give. John exhaled slowly. He thought of battles he had fought, of humans who indeed had taken too much, destroyed too much. But he also thought of the small moments, saving a stranger, sharing bread, giving hope where no one else would. I don't care what your people say, he answered. I help because it's right. No one deserves to starve. No one deserves to be hunted. Lyra studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, she moved from the chair and sat on the floor closer to the fire. She curled up, her head resting against the wall. But before her eyes closed, she whispered, My mother was right. She said maybe one human could be different. John's heart tightened at her words. He sat near the fire, knife still by his side, watching her as she drifted into sleep. The storm outside grew stronger. Branches knocked against the roof. Somewhere in the forest, distant voices echoed, searching, calling. The hunters had not given up. John's eyes stayed on the door. He knew this night would not pass quietly. He had shared a meal with the orphan, but that simple act had already tied him to her fate. And in the darkness, as the wind howled and danger closed in, John realized he was no longer just protecting an alien child. He was protecting the last promise of a dying mother. The fire burned low in the cabin, throwing soft light across the wooden walls. John sat near the door with his knife resting in his hand, his ears trained on the forest outside. Lyra slept lightly near the hearth, curled against the warmth, her hand still clutching the pendant under her dress. The storm outside had eased, but silence carried its own warning. It was not the silence of peace, it was the silence of watchers. A twig snapped, then another. John's body tensed. He moved slowly to the window, lifting the curtain just a fraction. Shadows moved between the trees. Figures 3, maybe 4, keeping their distance, circling. Their movements were deliberate. Hunters waiting for the right moment. He turned his gaze back to Lyra. She stirred in her sleep, whispering something too soft to catch. When she shifted, the pendant glimmered faintly in the firelight. Even half hidden, it pulsed with a strange energy. That was what they were after. John tightened his grip on the knife. He had no illusions. His cabin was no fortress. If they rushed the door, he could hold them off for a while, but not forever. Still, leaving Lyra outside was unthinkable. The silence broke with a heavy knock on the door. Not like Lyra's knock this. One was loud, demanding. Open, a rough voice called Dot. John didn't move. Another knock came, louder this time. We know what you hide, human. Hand her over, and we leave you breathing. Lyra woke instantly. Her eyes wide, she scrambled to her feet, backing against the wall. Fear gripped her face as the voice outside continued. She carries what belongs to us. She is nothing, and you are nothing. Give her, or share her fate. John's jaw hardened. He opened the latch slightly, not enough for them to enter, but enough for his words to pass through. She's under my roof, he said firmly. You'll not touch her." Laughter echoed from outside. A human playing guardian. Do you know what you protect? That trinket in her hands will cost you your life. John shut the latch again, his eyes never leaving the door. He turned to Lyra. "Listen carefully. They want the pendant." "Why?" Her breath came fast, her small hands shaking. She whispered, "It is not just a trinket. It holds the voice of my mother, her last words, and something more. A map." John's brow furrowed. "A map?" She nodded quickly. "To a place my people forbid. But my mother said it is the only chance for freedom. That is why they want it destroyed. That is why they want me gone." The pounding on the door grew stronger. The wood creaked under the force. John realized then this was no simple chase for a lost child. This was about power, control, and a secret that could change more than one world. The attackers shouted again. "Last warning. Human, step aside or your cabin burns with you inside." John turned to Lyra. "Do you trust me?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "Then stay close." He said. The next moment, the window shattered. A stone wrapped in burning cloth flew into the cabin, hitting the floor with a burst of flame. Smoke filled the air instantly. John grabbed a blanket, smothering the fire before it spread. But the smoke was already thick. Outside, more shadows. Rushed forward, Lyra coughed, covering her face. She clutched the pendant as if it could shield her. John grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back door. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. They slipped out into the stormy night. The forest was dark, the ground wet, but they ran. Behind them, the cabin door cracked open with a crash, and rough voices filled the air. "Find them. The girl cannot escape." Lyra stumbled as they ran, but John caught her, lifting her in his arms. She was light, too light, a reminder of how weak she had grown. He pushed forward, his boots sinking into mud, his breath heavy, but his grip unshaken. Torches flared in the distance as the pursuers spread out, their voices calling through the trees. They were hunting not just an orphan, they were hunting the one hope her mother had left behind. John moved with purpose, weaving between trees, keeping to the shadows. He knew the forest better than they did. Still, their numbers gave them an edge. If they surrounded him, escape would be impossible. Lyra whispered in his arms, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." John's eyes stayed sharp on the path ahead. "I don't need to know you. I just know you deserve a chance." Her tears glistened in the faint torchlight. For the first time, her grip on the pendant loosened slightly. She looked up at him with a mix of fear and something else, hope. The forest echoed with shouts. The hunters were closing in. But John's steps did not falter. The chase had begun. And he knew this was only the first night of many. The night wrapped the forest in silence again, but it was no silence of peace. It was the heavy breath of danger, waiting for its chance. John pushed through the wet undergrowth, carrying Lyra in his arms until he felt her tug weakly at his sleeve. "Put me down," she whispered. "I can run." John slowed and lowered her gently to the ground. She stumbled but forced herself forward, her small feet splashing in the mud. She held the pendant tightly against her chest, as if it were her last breath. They reached a hollow, beneath a fallen tree. John motioned for her to crawl inside while he kept watch outside. The glow of torches still moved in the distance, their voices carrying anger and hunger. Inside the hollow, Lyra's hands shook. She whispered to herself, words John could not fully hear. When he turned, he saw the pendant glowing faintly in her palms. "Stop that light," John whispered sharply. "I can't," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "It responds to my blood." John frowned, kneeling beside her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then pulled the chain fully into view. The pendant was no simple ornament. It was shaped like a tear, smooth and silver, yet alive with faint patterns that shifted as if breathing. "My mother gave it to me before she died," Lyra said. Her voice was soft, but the weight of truth pressed through every word. She said it carries her final memory and a key. "A map to a place my people forbid." She said only I can open it. John stared at the pendant. A map to what? Lyra's eyes glistened with tears. To freedom. The word struck him harder than he expected. Freedom, one word that carried both hope and danger. Lyra continued, her small voice steady despite her fear. "My people live under the high houses. They control everything, food, shelter, even air. My mother worked for them. She found something. They never wanted us to know. She hid it here, inside this pendant. That is why they want me gone. Because if I live, their lies die." Her hands clutched the glowing pendant tighter. She told me, "If I find a human, one who is different, I should trust him." She said humans are feared because they do not bend easily, because they fight for what they believe. John's chest tightened at her words. He had been called many things in his life: soldier, mercenary, survivor, but never savior. And now this small alien girl had placed her faith in him. As if he were the last wall between her and death. The voices grew closer. Torches flared through the trees. Lyra pressed deeper into the hollow, her breathing fast. John crouched at the entrance, his knife ready. "They won't stop," he whispered. "As long as you hold that pendant, they'll keep hunting." Lyra's eyes locked onto his. "Then you should leave me. They take me, they'll stop chasing you." John almost laughed at the thought, but his voice was iron when he answered, "I don't leave people behind." Her lip trembled. "But I'm not people. I'm just a burden." John shook his head. "You're a child, and children are never burdens, not to those who care." Her tears fell silently. She looked at him with something new, something fragile but strong. Trust. The forest erupted with shouts. The hunters were close now. Shadows moved across the clearing, searching. One torch lifted high, its light brushing against the hollow. John grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her close. "Stay behind me." The first hunter stepped forward, tall and armored, his eyes glowing in the firelight. He raised his weapon, pointing at the pendant. "Give it, human. We burn the forest until nothing is left." John stood firm. "You want her. You'll have to come through me." The hunter snarled, signaling to the others. More figures closed in, circling the clearing. Lyra gasped, clutching John's arm. Then the pendant pulsed bright, stronger than before. A wave of light spread through the hollow, forcing the hunters to shield their eyes. Strange symbols floated in the air, glowing and shifting. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "It's showing me the path." John stared at the floating shapes. It was not just a map, it was a star chart, ancient and vast. Pointing to a place deep in the galaxy, the hunters roared in anger, charging forward. John gripped his knife tighter, pulling Lyra behind him. The secret she carried was no longer hidden. And now, the fight for it had truly begun. The glow of the pendant filled the hollow like a rising sun. Strange symbols floated in the air, spinning slowly before fading back into the silver tear that hung against Lyra's chest. For a moment, the hunters stopped, their torches shaking in their hands. Then anger replaced their fear. "Kill them both." The leader snarled. The hunters rushed forward, their boots crashing through the mud, their weapons drawn. Lyra gasped, clutching the pendant tighter as if her mother's voice could protect her. John stepped in front of her, knife in hand. His body steady, his eyes hard. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The first hunter lunged. John sidestepped quickly, his knife flashing in the torchlight. He slashed across the attacker's arm, forcing him back with a cry. The second hunter came fast, swinging a heavy staff. John ducked, the weapon smashing against the fallen tree. He drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest, knocking him backward. But there were too many. 3 more circled, their eyes burning with hatred. One sneered, "You think one human can stop us?" John's voice was sharp, calm, unshaken. "I don't need to stop all of you. Just need to stand long enough." His words carried weight. For him, this was not about survival, it was about keeping a promise. Lyra pressed against the hollow wall, her small body shaking. She wanted to scream, to run, but she could not leave him. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. Trust. Human. For the first time, she understood why. The leader stepped forward, taller than the rest, armored in black plates that shimmered in the torchlight. His weapon gleamed with cruel edges. He pointed it at John. "Move aside, human. That girl is a curse. Her blood will end your life as well as hers." John's jaw tightened. "She's a child. The only curse here is what you've done to her people." With a roar, the leader attacked. His weapon swung like a blade of fire, crashing against John's knife. Sparks flew. The force pushed John back, his boots sinking into the mud. But he did not fall. He pushed forward again, his muscles straining, his breath sharp. His will unbroken. The hunters circled closer, waiting for the human to fail. But every time the leader struck, John blocked. Every time the blade cut, John turned it aside. His arms burned with pain, but his eyes never left the enemy. Lyra cried out, "Please, stop, he'll kill you." John shouted back, his voice fierce, "Then I'll die standing." The words stunned even the hunters for a moment. They had seen humans fight for survival before, but never for someone who was not their own. The leader growled, striking harder. John staggered, his knife slipping. The blade cut across his shoulder, blood spilling down his arm. He winced, but did not retreat. He stepped forward again, striking with desperate strength. His knife cut across the leader's armor, leaving a shallow mark. The other hunters roared in anger, rushing at once. John braced himself, but before they reached him, the pendant flared again. A wave of light burst out, forcing them all to stumble back. The ground shook faintly as if the forest itself answered the call. Lyra's voice rang out, high and clear, though she did not know how she spoke the words. "Leave us." The hunters froze. For a moment, they looked uncertain. The leader snarled, lifting his weapon again, but hesitation had entered his eyes. John stepped forward, blood dripping from his arm, knife still ready. His voice was cold steel. "You heard her. If you want her, you'll have to kill me first. And I promise I'll take more than one of you with me." The hunters glanced at one another. They had numbers, but something in the human's stance made them hesitate. His body bled, but his spirit stood like stone. The leader spat on the ground. "This is not the end. She cannot hide forever. And you, human, you cannot protect her from the galaxy." With a sharp gesture, he pulled his hunters back. They faded into the shadows, their torches vanishing between the trees. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. John dropped to one knee, his breath heavy, his wound burning. Lyra rushed forward, her eyes wide with terror. "You're hurt." John forced a small smile through the pain. "Better me than you." She pressed her hands against his wound, her tears falling. "Why? Why do this for me?" He looked at her, his voice low but strong. "Because someone has to, because your life matters." For the first time, Lyra's sobs were not of fear, but of something else, relief. She clutched his arm tightly, whispering through her tears. "Then I'll never leave you. Not now, not ever." And as the forest quieted, John realized the truth. This was no longer just about survival. This was about protecting the last hope of a people who had given up hope themselves. The forest was silent again, but the silence was heavy with tension. John leaned against the fallen tree, blood seeping from his shoulder, his breath slow but steady. Lyra knelt beside him, her small hands pressing against the wound with all the strength she had. Her tears mixed with the dirt on her face, but she did not look away. "You'll be fine," she whispered again and again, as if saying it enough times would make it true. John gave her a faint smile. "I've had worse." But deep inside, he knew the fight had pushed him to his limit. He was only one man, and the hunters would return. The pendant had revealed too much. They would not stop until they had it. Lyra's fingers brushed the glowing silver tear at her chest. The light pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. She stared at it, then at John. "I should go," she whispered. "If I leave, they'll stop chasing. You'll be safe." John shook his head, his voice sharp despite the pain. "No, running alone is not safety. It's death." Her lips trembled. "But I can't let you fight for me again." "You'll die." He placed his hand on hers, steady and firm. "If I die, at least it will mean something. But I'm not planning to die. Not yet. Not while you still have a chance." Lyra blinked, stunned by the certainty in his words. No one in her life had ever spoken like that. No one had ever chosen her over themselves. For a long time, she was silent. Then she whispered, "My mother told me the pendant carries not only a map, but a choice. A choice for tomorrow. She said, I must give it to the one I trust most." John raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's me?" Her answer was simple, yes. The pendant flared brighter in her hands. Strange symbols filled the air again, spinning like stars in the night sky. This time, the patterns were clear lines connecting worlds, paths across the galaxy. At the center was a mark that glowed stronger than the rest. John stared at it, awe softening his battle-hardened face. "That's where it leads." Lyra nodded. "A hidden place. A world where the high houses cannot reach. My mother said it's where freedom begins." The map faded back into the pendant. Lyra held it close, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. "But I can't reach it alone." John tightened his grip on the knife still in his hand. His shoulder burned, his body screamed for rest, but his spirit stood firm. "Then we go together." Her eyes widened. "Together." He nodded. "Tomorrow, we start walking. We'll find a way. If your mother believed this map could change everything, then it's worth protecting. And if she believed a human could help, then I won't prove her wrong." Lyra's tears fell again, but this time they carried warmth instead of despair. She leaned closer, whispering softly, "Then I'll never leave your side." The fire in John's chest grew stronger. For years, he had wandered alone, a soldier with no cause, a man with no purpose. But now, with this fragile child clinging to his arm, he felt something he thought he had lost meaning. The dawn began to rise, painting the forest in soft light. The hunters were gone for now, but their threat lingered. The fight was not over. It was only the beginning. John stood slowly, ignoring the pain. Lyra helped steady him, her tiny hands gripping his arm firmly. Together, they stepped out of the hollow. The forest stretched before them, vast and full of danger, but also full of paths yet unseen. John glanced down at her. "You ready?" She nodded, her small voice steady. "As long as I stay close." He gave her a rare smile. "Then close is where you'll stay." They began to walk, their steps slow but sure. Behind them lay ashes of a night filled with fire and blood. Ahead of them lay a future no one could predict. But one thing was certain. The hunters had underestimated what one human could do when he chose to stand. And they had underestimated the strength of a child's hope. Together, they would carry the secret of the pendant. Together, they would follow the map. Together, they would face tomorrow, and for the first time since her mother's death. Lyra whispered, not with fear, but with faith, "We will make it." John tightened his grip on his knife and looked toward the horizon. Yes, we will. The choice of tomorrow had been made.